The early morning was quiet, with tides lapping at the shore. Years of wandering had brought me to this place, where I started each day with a run along the coast, letting go of the past. Life hadn't always been solitary. My family had been my anchor, but cracks forced me to rebuild alone. Now, I lived in sync with the waves. The day's plan was simple: a run, a shower, and college football. San Diego State played in the morning, USC in the afternoon. After an 8-mile run, I cleared my head and enjoyed La Jolla's warmth while much of the country faced snow. After a shower, I headed to Tequila Joe's, where San Diego State had already scored. The bar's big screens and good food made it my favorite spot. Vivian, the friendly waitress, greeted me with her usual warmth. San Diego State played well with smooth plays and strong defense. I finished my chicken salad and ordered another beer. As the team neared another touchdown, a man walked in, heading straight for me. I didn't notice him until he stood in front of me, and I looked up, startled to see him. "Hi, Dad," he said. The words hit me like a blow. There was a time when hearing them filled me with indescribable joy, but those days were far behind me. Now they stung. I studied him briefly, trying to connect the grown man before me with the boy I once knew. He wasn't a child anymore, not by a long shot. James was over 21 now. It had been 5 years since I'd last seen him. Back then, he was an awkward, lanky 16-year-old just beginning to shave. Now he stood taller, broader, and with a muscular frame. He had grown into a man during my absence. "Hello, James," I replied, keeping my tone composed. "Why?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. I had played out this moment in my mind countless times, rehearsing what to say if we ever met again. But now, faced with James, I was blank. His anger was unmistakable. Clenched fists, white-knuckled, fury in his eyes. I stayed seated knowing standing might provoke him. I felt a deep, bitter regret for the pain I'd caused him and his brothers over the past 5 years. The only words I could muster were the truth. "I'm not your dad." His voice rose, bewildered. "What?" "I assume you're asking why I left you, your brothers, and your mom. The reason is simple. I'm not your father." The tension in his fists eased, but his face showed shock and confusion. The revelation was shattering his understanding of the past, much like it had destroyed mine years ago. I guided him into a chair, and as his world began to unravel, I called for 2 beers. This wasn't how I had imagined sharing a drink with the boy I once thought was my son. "How?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. I looked him in the eye. "It started in high school. Your mother, Sandy, and I met in science class. She was the new girl, and we quickly became inseparable. She was beautiful, smart, and kind. Over the years, we fell deeply in love. By the time we graduated, I was heading to MIT, and she enrolled at Boston College so we could stay together. We moved to Boston, struggled through school, and built a life. We were young and wildly in love." I paused to let him absorb the history before continuing. "After graduation, we moved back to Denver, got married, and started our life together. I landed a job in aeronautical engineering, and she worked in medical billing. Our first years were busy but happy. Then Sandy got pregnant. When you were born, I was overjoyed. You were perfect, and I poured myself into providing for our family." James was silent, absorbing every word. "With a new baby, things were hectic, but we managed. Sandy got pregnant again, and we moved to a larger house in the suburbs before your brother Caleb arrived. Life was chaotic with 2 young kids, but I thought we were happy. I had no idea something was wrong until 5 years ago." I stopped, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. That's when I learned the truth. Sandy had been unfaithful more than once. A paternity test confirmed what I didn't want to believe. Neither you nor your brother was mine. James stared at me, his world crumbling further. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't know how," I admitted. "You were kids, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy the only sense of family you knew. So I left, thinking it was better for all of us. But I see now that leaving caused even more pain." Vivian brought the beers, and we sat in heavy silence. The truth was out, but it felt like cold comfort. After Caleb was born, Sandy and I decided she wouldn't return to work. She kept in touch with her friends and occasionally went out, but within a year she was pregnant again. Eric arrived, and a year later, Daniel followed. By the time Daniel was born, you were 4. 4 boys felt like enough, and Sandy had her tubes tied. With 4 kids, intimacy between us became strained, but I didn't mind. I thought we were happy. Our small home quickly became cramped, so we moved to a house in Aurora with a spacious yard for you boys to play in. As time went on, I noticed subtle things about Sandy. She always referred to you as her boys, never ours, which stung more than I cared to admit. At social events, she'd dismiss my work, telling people I drew planes for a living. I didn't correct her, partly to avoid embarrassing her, but also because my work was classified. Still, it hurt. My career was demanding. I led a design team developing a stealth fighter, and with tensions brewing in the Middle East, the Air Force pressed hard for results. Despite my workload, I prioritized family. I never missed a Little League game, even coaching some of your teams. Balancing work and fatherhood with 4 kids wasn't easy, but I made it work. When Daniel started school, Sandy had more free time and threw herself into volunteering. She worked with organizations like the Breast Cancer Society and the Library Foundation, creating a new social circle and filling her days. Life seemed good. My stealth fighter debuted during the Gulf War, earning global acclaim. You boys were thriving in sports and activities, and Sandy appeared fulfilled. But under the surface, cracks were forming. Looking back, I see how Sandy occasionally tried to create distance between me and you boys. She signed you all up for different activities, baseball, football, volleyball, and music, ensuring I was spread thin. Daniel's musical talent stood out, though. It amazed me, as neither Sandy nor I were musical. I joked once that maybe the postman was a musician, and Sandy just smiled. Then everything unraveled. I turned 40 and the Air Force required a physical. The tests were routine until the doctor discovered something unusual during an exam. Concerned, he referred me to a specialist. When the medical community moves fast, you know it's serious. I endured more tests, and while relieved it wasn't cancer, the specialist blindsided me with an unexpected question. When did you become sterile? Confused, I insisted I wasn't sterile. I had 4 sons. The doctor politely disagreed. Shocked and disbelieving, I sought 2nd, 3rd, and 4th opinions. They all confirmed the same thing. I was sterile, likely due to a motorcycle accident at 14. Devastation doesn't begin to describe how I felt. I needed answers, so I took all 4 of you to the doctor under the guise of flu shots. Instead, I ordered DNA tests. 2 weeks later, the results confirmed my worst fears. Not only were none of you biologically mine, but each of you had a different father. My world shattered. I spent that night drowning in scotch at a bar, trying to process the betrayal and lies. The next morning, I tried to function but couldn't. My team at work noticed and sent me home. That evening, Sandy prepared dinner, completely unaware of what I'd learned. I sat across from her, replaying every moment of our life together through a new lens. The woman I loved now seemed like a stranger. Overwhelmed, I excused myself and vomited. I purged not just the meal, but the life I thought I had. Sandy tried to comfort me, but I pushed her away, retreating to the spare bedroom to cry through the night. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. I quit my job, emptied half of our savings, and left a simple note on the table. I know. Then I got in my truck and drove east, aimlessly chasing escape. I reached the Atlantic Ocean in Maine, where I contemplated ending it all, staring at the waves and imagining how far I could swim before giving up. But even at my lowest, I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave you boys without answers as much as I hated Sandy. For months, I drifted down the East Coast, taking odd jobs to survive. I worked as a dishwasher, a fry cook, and even a tram driver at Disney World. In Atlanta, while working at an auto shop, the FBI found me. Apparently, the government doesn't appreciate it when someone with top-secret clearance vanishes. The agents weren't hostile, just concerned. They questioned why I left, but I gave them a vague answer about marital issues. They didn't press further, only reminding me of my confidentiality agreements. One agent offered a quiet apology before they left, acknowledging my pain without saying the words. And then they were gone, leaving me to piece together what was left of my life. Work had become my refuge after my life unraveled. Back at the shop, Al handed me a brake job, but I could tell he didn't trust me anymore. A week later, I left. From then on, I suspected the feds were keeping tabs on me, occasionally sending someone to check in. They likely wanted reassurance that I wasn't revealing classified information, but sharing secrets, or even speaking to anyone, was far from my mind. I was broken, and people seemed to sense it, giving me space. I wandered the East Coast for a year before heading west. New Orleans, Houston, Kansas City, Phoenix, and finally, the Pacific. My days were filled with fleeting jobs, endless thinking, and too many tears. I replayed every moment of my past with Sandy, looking for signs I had missed, clues hidden in plain sight. I remembered coworkers, James, Caleb, Susan's boyfriend Daniel, and felt the crushing weight of their names. Each memory deepened the betrayal. On the West Coast, amidst the chaos in my mind, I found solace in the sunsets. Every evening, I watched the sun dip into the ocean, each one unique and strangely healing. Slowly, I began piecing myself back together. Answers never came, but I started to accept that they might not. In Seattle, while working as a waiter in a family restaurant, life took an unexpected turn. One afternoon, two men came in, looking every bit the engineers with their pocket protectors and blueprints. I noticed their jet design, a small executive aircraft, and casually pointed out a flaw in the air intake. They were startled by my observation, and I sketched a quick adjustment on a napkin, calculating how it could improve performance. Speechless, they left with my unsolicited advice but returned the next day with a man named Brad Linsky. He confirmed my suggestions were accurate and asked to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. Brad and his partners were developing a new jet, and my insights had impressed them. After days of hesitation, I decided to hear them out. Soon I found myself flying to San Diego in their jet, reviewing designs and offering more improvements. Brad was persistent, and before I knew it, I was signing on as a partner in their project. For the first time in years, I felt purpose return. My ideas shaped the aircraft, some even earning patents, and our work gained attention from major players like Airbus and Boeing. Licensing deals brought in royalties, and my life, once shattered, began to rebuild. I bought a house on the beach where I could watch the sunsets that had become my therapy. Work consumed me, helping me escape the loneliness that lingered. For 5 years, I kept everyone at arm's length. Then James walked into my life, bringing the past I had buried crashing back. He sat across from me in a dimly lit sports bar, his face etched with pain. As I recounted everything, my discoveries, the betrayal, and my failures, he listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he looked older, burdened by truths he hadn't expected to hear. His tears mirrored my own as he stood to leave. Before walking out, he hugged me, an embrace filled with raw emotion. That night, I sat in a daze, unsure of what to do next. The memories of Sandy remained a blurry, painful history I tried to suppress. But the boys? They were different. I'd failed them. They weren't my biological sons, but I had been their father, and I abandoned them when they needed me most. Forgiving myself felt impossible. James asked if we could talk again tomorrow. I said yes. As he left, I felt a glimmer of hope, though uncertainty loomed. After he was gone, Vivian, the bartender, approached with 2 beers. She admitted she'd overheard everything and hugged me tightly, her tears joining mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And for a moment, I didn't feel entirely alone. My entire world fractured in an instant. "You're not my son," reverberated endlessly in my head, overshadowing every word that followed. I heard the rest of his story, but those 4 words defined everything. My identity, my origins, everything I believed about my life was obliterated. Tears burned my face as I stumbled out of the restaurant, numb and desperate for the solitude of my hotel room. At a small hotel in Pacific Beach, I tried to piece together the day's events. It was impossible. I wanted the life I'd known, but I understood it was gone. For 5 years, I had been the de facto father figure for my brothers, a role I couldn't abandon. Yet as I lay there, memories attacked me. Every Little League game, every family dinner. Every night he held my head when I was sick. This man, whose blood I didn't share, had been my father in every way that mattered. Sorrow consumed me until sleep mercifully overtook the pain. Morning came cold and unforgiving. The brisk Pacific air offered no clarity. I dressed quickly and headed to his house, walking the few miles that felt endless. When I arrived, he opened the door before the bell finished ringing. He invited me in, but I declined. "I heard everything you said," I began, "but I have questions, and I need answers. I'm heading home today, and I have to figure out what to do next." His eyes held the weight of regret. "What will you tell your brothers? Your mother?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted truthfully. I wasn't ready to face those conversations. There was a heavy silence between us. I broke it. "Whoever my biological father is, he's irrelevant. You raised me. You're my dad. You always have been." My voice cracked and tears followed. He pulled me into an embrace, his strength anchoring me as we both wept. "I want to be back in your lives," he said softly. "But I can't face your mother. That pain is too deep. Every memory feels tainted. I don't know how to start." We moved to the kitchen, where he poured 2 cups of coffee. We sat in silence, staring at the waves beyond the patio. "You're right," I said finally. "Mom hurt you. She hurt all of us. But she's still my mom, and you're still my dad. My brothers and I need you in our lives, no matter how complicated this is. We'll figure it out." I saw something shift in him then. The burden he'd carried visibly lifted, and he seemed to stand taller. His hug was crushing, his emotions raw. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I left with hope, but also uncertainty. The road ahead would be anything but simple. The drive west had been long and full of reflection, but heading home was different. Memories flooded back, especially the day everything changed. I was 16, arriving home early from school. My routine was simple: drop my bag by the stairs, raid the fridge, and drink milk straight from the carton when no one was watching. That day, though, I saw a note on the kitchen table. In Dad's handwriting, it read, "I know." I didn't understand what it meant, so I left it there. Figuring I'd find out when Mom and Dad got home, I went to watch a rerun of The Simpsons before starting homework. But the peace didn't last. A piercing cry echoed through the house. I rushed downstairs to find Mom crumpled on the floor, clutching the note to her chest. Her sobs were primal, guttural. I tried to help her, but she was inconsolable. I managed to guide her to the bedroom where she curled around Dad's pillow, trembling. "Where's Dad?" I asked, desperate for answers. "He had to leave," she whispered through tears. "He had to go." I didn't know what to do. Caleb and Daniel were playing in the yard, oblivious to the chaos. Eric wouldn't be home until dinner. Mom asked me to make mac and cheese for my brothers, so I did. Around the table, the conversation was light. Video games, school fights, basketball schedules. No one mentioned Mom's absence or Dad's sudden departure. Later that evening, I tried calling Dad. He didn't answer. My heart sank as I left a voicemail, begging him to call back. He never did. The next morning, Mom looked hollow. She told me to get ready for school and promised we'd talk that evening. I didn't press her, but unease settled deep in my chest. That night, when she finally explained that Dad had left and wasn't coming back, our lives shifted forever. Now, driving home from San Diego, I couldn't shake the weight of those memories. Dad had been everything to us, even when he left. Now I had to figure out how to rebuild the bridge between him and my brothers. The road ahead seemed endless, but for the first time, I felt like there was a chance to mend what had been broken. All day, I dreaded the inevitable conversation waiting at home. I couldn't focus in class or recall a single thing any teacher said. By the time the final bell rang, I bolted straight home, hoping to find answers, but fearing the worst. When I arrived, Aunt Lauren was there. Though not a blood relative, she was a close friend of Mom's, and her presence was a bad sign. She was tidying up, washing dishes, and moving through the house as if she belonged there. Without a word, I headed upstairs, passing Mom's closed bedroom door, and collapsed on my bed. Tears came unbidden, a slow trickle down my cheeks. I could hear my brothers arrive, their laughter mingling with the familiar hum of the Xbox. How could they not sense the dread hanging over us? Dinner came too soon. Aunt Lauren called us to the table, where she had set out a meal. Mom appeared moments later. She looked fragile, as if she had barely held herself together long enough to make it downstairs. Her silence was deafening. She sat in her usual seat, but there was no plate set for Dad. As we ate, the usual sibling banter, teasing, joking, and petty arguments was absent. An unspoken understanding settled over us. Nothing would ever be the same. I kept glancing at Mom, who barely touched her food, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Halfway through the meal, she spoke. She began with a strained confession. She admitted to a mistake so painful that Dad had left, his anger too great for reconciliation. Her words were heavy with guilt, and her message was clear. We were not to blame, nor was Dad. The fault, she insisted, was hers alone. As her words sank in, the table fell silent. I heard quiet sobs from my brothers, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Mom abruptly excused herself, retreating upstairs, and the rest of us sat in stunned silence. Plates remained half full as my brothers scattered to grieve in their own ways. Aunt Lauren stayed behind, clearing the table and washing dishes. Out of habit, I joined her, drying plates as she washed. In a quiet, steady voice, she turned to me and said I would have to take on more responsibility as the eldest. She emphasized how much my brothers and Mom would need me. Nodding silently, I agreed, though I couldn't help but wonder who would be there for me. That dinner marked the beginning of our family's slow unraveling. Mom, who once volunteered at the Cancer Society, announced the following week that she had taken a paying job. It wasn't much, she said, and we'd have to tighten our belts. Money became an ongoing concern. In less than 6 months, our lives changed drastically. There were no more video games, no more dinners at restaurants, no more small indulgences like chips or soda. I quit after-school sports and got a part-time job at Denny's, bussing tables and refilling drinks. The modest paycheck I earned was split among my brothers, softening the blow for them but stretching me thin. Each of us dealt with Dad's absence in our own way. Caleb poured himself into academics, determined to make Dad proud if he ever came back. Eric channeled his energy into sports, becoming an all-star athlete but sacrificing any semblance of a social life. Daniel, however, drifted. At first, he found solace in his guitar, but by 13, he began falling in with the wrong crowd. By 14, I was certain he was smoking pot, coming home with bloodshot eyes and a defiant attitude. I tried to intervene, but he met me with anger, yelling that I wasn't his father. It stung, but I didn't have the tools to help him. My own guilt weighed heavily, consuming my thoughts. I worked long hours, but it was never enough. Mom continued to withdraw, working exhausting hours and retreating to her room each night. The vibrant woman she once was faded, replaced by someone pale, tired, and burdened by regret. Aunt Lauren visited occasionally, but the warmth and laughter of our home were gone. Blame crept into our family dynamic. Caleb and Eric eventually turned their anger toward Dad, resenting his inability to forgive Mom. Daniel, on the other hand, directed his anger at her, their relationship deteriorating into constant conflict. I found myself stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace while struggling with my own resentment toward both of them. By the time I turned 19, I decided to search for Dad. Mom claimed she hadn't found him, but I suspected she had tried. My efforts were sporadic, combing through online records and articles that mentioned his name. Then, one day, I found a clue. A race listing for the San Diego Half Marathon matched his name and age, with La Jolla listed as his residence. A background photo of the race crowd revealed someone who looked like him. With that lead, I decided to track him down. My family was at a crossroads, and I held the key to unraveling or healing the wounds that had defined us for years. As I made my way back from San Diego, the weight of what I'd discovered pressed heavily on me. The truth could shift my brother's resentment toward Mom, who was barely holding on. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew it was my burden to carry. Stopping for the night at a small motel, I tried to sleep, but the questions and doubts kept me awake. By morning, I was back on the road, each mile bringing me closer to home and the reckoning that awaited. The restaurant where I worked was a revolving door of young staff, but somehow I managed to stick around the longest. 8 months earlier, a new waitress named Vanessa Brown was hired. She was stunning with an infectious energy that drew everyone in. Despite her popularity, she gravitated toward me, and we quickly struck up a friendship. Balancing school, work, and family left me little time for anything else. But one night after a shift, I impulsively asked her to grab coffee. To my surprise, she agreed. That night at Starbucks turned into hours of conversation, the first of many coffee dates. Within weeks, we were spending most of our free time together. Eventually, I asked her on a proper date, and from there, our relationship blossomed. Months later, Vanessa invited me to her place while her roommate was out. That night, I lost my pureness to her and assumed she'd done the same. Our connection deepened, or so I thought. By the time we hit our 5-month anniversary, I gave her a promise ring, which she accepted with enthusiasm, declaring her love for me. For a while, I believed I was truly happy. But happiness is fragile. 8 months into our relationship, I picked up an extra shift at the restaurant, only for it to end early when the original waitress returned. Excited to surprise Vanessa, I headed to her apartment. Passing her window, I froze at the sight of her kissing Simon Joyner, our morning manager. My heart sank. When Vanessa opened the door, her shock was evident. She stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. Calmly, I asked for my ring back, removing it from her hand myself. I told her to forget I ever existed and walked away, shattered. That night, I packed a bag and left for San Diego, chasing the leads I had on my father, hoping the distance would help me process the betrayal. Returning home from San Diego days later, I kept my trip vague during dinner with my family, casually mentioning visits to tourist attractions and potential schools for my younger brothers. When Mom asked about Vanessa, I told her the truth. Her reaction was immediate. She fled the table in tears. My brothers teased me, but I was lost in thought, unable to shake the parallels between Vanessa's betrayal and Mom's infidelity. Both had destroyed the trust they were given, though Mom's actions had torn apart an entire family. Determined to help my brothers escape the weight of our home life, I suggested Caleb and Eric consider San Diego State University. Caleb could transfer as a junior, and Eric could start as a freshman. Initially, they resisted, hesitant to leave Mom and Daniel behind. Eric warmed up to the idea quickly, but Caleb was reluctant, questioning my insistence on San Diego. Frustrated, I finally revealed the truth. Dad was there. The news stunned them. A flurry of questions followed: where he was, why he left, and whether they could see him. I explained how I had found him after Vanessa and I broke up and that I'd been in contact with him ever since. Dad was supportive of their move to San Diego, but didn't want Mom to know. The plan gained momentum, and we framed it as a school visit during winter break. Mom was supportive, but clearly uneasy about the idea. On the day they left, she hugged them tightly, unaware they were staying at Dad's house. Daniel and I watched them drive off, unsure what the trip would bring. Over the next few days, Caleb and Eric called regularly, sounding happier than I'd heard them in years. They raved about San Diego's beauty, the university, and the person helping them with their applications: Dad. When they returned home, their excitement was palpable. Both had applied to SDSU, confident scholarships and financial aid would make it possible. That night, as we gathered for pizza, they shared stories from their trip. While Mom smiled and listened, I could see the tension behind her eyes. She knew something had shifted but didn't ask. As my brothers talked about their plans, I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter would affect our family, and whether it might finally bring some healing. Life seemed to unravel in slow motion after Mom left the table that evening, retreating to her room as she often did. Daniel disappeared as well, leaving Caleb, Eric, and me alone. That privacy allowed Caleb and Eric to open up about their time with Dad. They described how emotional their reunion had been, their decision to stay in San Diego after school ended, and their choice to let Dad's version of events lie, sparing Mom further pain. The months leading up to their departure were bittersweet. Caleb excelled academically, and Eric shone in sports, earning recognition for his achievements. Amid their preparations, no one seemed to notice Daniel's increasing withdrawal or Mom's worsening state. I knew Daniel had moved on to harder pills, and my attempts at intervention were met with anger and defiance. Mom, though aware, seemed powerless to help. Her health visibly declined. She was thinner, her energy waning, and her once lustrous hair now dull. Just after Christmas, Daniel disappeared for 3 days. Police found him in a pills house, dazed and strung out. We placed him in a rehab center, but he fought the process every step of the way. During a family session, Daniel unleashed his fury at Mom, blaming her for Dad's absence and the family's disintegration. Her tears didn't stop him. If anything, they fueled his anger. In a trembling voice, she took responsibility, asking him to channel his pain into healing rather than self-destruction. By the time Caleb and Eric left for San Diego in June, the house felt emptier than ever. They settled quickly, excited for a fresh start and the chance to reconnect with Dad. I planned to visit them in August, but the trip was cut short when I received a devastating call from Mom. Daniel had overdosed and was in the ICU. Rushing back, I found Mom at Daniel's bedside, broken and exhausted. She blamed herself for not being able to save him. That night, Dad arrived unannounced, guilt heavy in his voice as he took responsibility for his absence. We discussed a plan to move Daniel to a rehab facility in San Diego, where being near his brothers and away from Mom might aid his recovery. Dad arranged everything, including the private jet to transport Daniel. The following day, as Mom and I prepared for Daniel's transfer, she insisted I go with him. She argued that as the family's anchor, Daniel needed me to guide him through recovery. Despite my protests, I was on the plane the next morning. Daniel's transition to the San Diego facility was smoother than expected, and over the next few weeks, progress was slow but steady. Family therapy sessions became pivotal. Daniel began to open up, admitting how much he missed Dad and wished for reconciliation. When the therapist asked what he'd say to his father if he could, Daniel tearfully expressed forgiveness and a longing to reunite. At that moment, Dad walked into the room. Daniel's initial shock gave way to overwhelming emotion as he fell to his knees, sobbing. Dad embraced him, and soon, Caleb, Eric, and I joined in. It felt like a long-lost piece of our family had returned. Therapy continued to address Daniel's obsession and our fractured family dynamics, but one glaring issue remained unspoken: Mom. Dad couldn't bring himself to confront her, and I had no idea how to bridge the gap. I kept Mom updated on Daniel's progress, but withheld any mention of Dad's involvement. 2 months into Daniel's recovery, I decided it was time to visit Mom. She dismissed the idea, insisting Daniel needed me more. Though reluctant, I respected her wishes, but began quietly planning a trip home. Before I could finalize anything, Aunt Lauren called with news that shattered me. Mom was gone. Her death brought an abrupt, devastating end to the fragile threads holding us together, leaving me grappling with the weight of unfinished conversations, unresolved pain, and a family forever altered. The cold mountain air pierced through me as we stood at the graveside. A small group gathered for Mom's final farewell. Her resting place was nestled among the trees, with a view of the distant peaks. She would have loved the peacefulness of it. My brothers, Eric, Caleb, Daniel, and I stood side by side, each of us engulfed in our grief. Mom's only brother had managed to attend, offering quiet support as we endured the ceremony in the bitter Colorado winter. Dad attended too, but he remained at a distance, standing silently in the background. After the service, we received condolences from Mom's coworkers and a few remaining friends. Her circle had grown small in the years since Dad left. As the eldest, I had handled most of the arrangements, but Mom had planned much of it in advance, leaving detailed instructions. Aunt Lauren was the last to leave the cemetery. She hugged each of us tightly, her tears flowing freely. When she reached me, she pulled me aside and handed me 2 envelopes. "Your mother wanted you to have these after she passed," she said. "She wouldn't let me tell anyone she was sick. Please call me after you read them." I tucked the letters into my pocket without looking and thanked her. Mom's death had blindsided us. None of us knew she had cancer. Reflecting on the past few months, I realized she had seemed unwell, tired, thinner, but I had attributed it to the stress of Daniel's struggles. Guilt gnawed at me. I should have seen the signs. The call from Aunt Lauren that night had turned my world upside down. When I told Dad and my brothers the news, the room fell silent, then erupted with tears and denial. Daniel broke down first, saying it couldn't be true. Dad pulled him into a hug, and soon we were all clinging to one another, grieving the loss of the woman who had held our family together through so much. Dad immediately arranged for us to fly back to Colorado. By the early hours of the morning, we arrived at the house. Aunt Lauren greeted us, offering her condolences and helping us settle in. Dad opted to stay at a hotel, saying he couldn't face staying in the house. The days that followed were a whirlwind of phone calls, funeral preparations, and quiet moments of reflection. The service was small, just family and a few friends. Afterward, we returned to the house for a quiet meal prepared by Lauren. That evening, we sat in the living room, wrapped in our thoughts. Lauren gently guided the conversation, asking questions that encouraged us to share memories of Mom. Her skillful approach helped break the silence and began to ease some of our pain. Dad remained mostly silent, though I caught Lauren's pleading glances toward him. He stayed distant, his emotions carefully guarded. After everyone retired for the night, I went to my room. As I removed my coat, I found the 2 envelopes Lauren had given me. Both were addressed to me in Mom's handwriting, with one marked, "Open me first." I sat on my bed, hesitated, then unfolded the first letter. Mom's words hit me like a tidal wave. She admitted to hiding her illness and confessed to carrying secrets that had shaped and shattered our family. Her letter detailed her gratitude for the life we shared, but also her profound regret for the lies that had tainted it. She wrote about her childhood in Oklahoma, her close-knit family, and the moment everything changed, a traumatic event that cast a shadow over her life. She revealed that when she was 14, she fell while climbing a tree and was injured. Her Uncle Jack, who was responsible for watching the children that day, attacked her under the pretense of caring for her injuries. She described the fear, confusion, and helplessness she felt, and how that experience shaped her choices and relationships, including those with Dad and us. As I read, waves of anger, sorrow, and understanding washed over me. Mom's pain had been hidden behind her strength, her secrets woven into the fabric of our family's story. This letter was her final attempt to unburden herself and pass that truth to me, trusting me to carry it forward. I folded the letter and set it aside, unable to open the second one yet. Exhaustion and emotion overwhelmed me. I knew this was just the beginning of uncovering a story I hadn't been prepared to face, but I also realized it might be the key to understanding her, our family, and how to move forward in the aftermath of her loss. Afterward, Uncle Jack told me never to tell anyone, insisting it was my fault for climbing the tree and getting hurt. He said people would blame me. I cried myself to sleep every night for a week, my parents none the wiser. They assumed my tears were from the injuries, and the bruises from his hands blended in with the ones from the fall. They never suspected anything. For the next year, Uncle Jack continued to offense me. I avoided playing with my cousins, but my brothers often forced me to join them. My parents thought I was being difficult and left me under his care. The offense happened nearly every month, with the family remaining close to Uncle Jack and his children. It wasn't until a year later that my father caught him. Dad came home early from work and found Uncle Jack attacking me in my bedroom. The rage in my father's eyes was something I'd never seen before. He pulled Uncle Jack off me and unleashed a flurry of punches, leaving Jack bloodied and unconscious. I sat frozen, shocked and exposed. An ambulance took Jack to the hospital, and the police came to investigate. The incident tore our family apart. Despite the evidence, many relatives sided with Jack, urging my father to forgive him and drop the charges. My dad refused. He gave the family an ultimatum: either support us and ensure Jack went to jail, or never speak to him again. When they tried to negotiate, Dad stood firm. Jack went to jail, and we moved to Colorado, severing all ties with Dad's family. Although my father's actions protected me, they didn't erase the damage. I carried the weight of guilt, not only for what Jack had done, but for tearing apart Dad's family. I felt broken, unworthy, and convinced no boy could ever truly want me. When I met your father in school, I was terrified of boys. Therapy helped me manage the trauma, but the fear lingered. He was different, patient, kind, and never pushed me into anything I wasn't ready for. We became close, supporting each other through our weaknesses. Over time, I fell in love with him. He asked me to homecoming, and I decided to give myself to him that night. The week leading up to it was a battle with doubt. I hadn't been touched by anyone since Uncle Jack, and the thought terrified me. But I wanted to move forward, to be loved. That night he was gentle and didn't do anything I didn't want. I felt safe, and for the first time, I believed I could have a future with him. From then on, I knew he was the man I would marry. When he was accepted to MIT, I was devastated. The thought of him leaving paralyzed me with fear. Both families worked to get me into Boston College so we could stay together. But in Boston, my insecurities began to resurface. He spent long hours studying, leaving me alone. I dreaded being by myself and surrounded myself with friends who helped me escape the loneliness. The group liked to party and drink, and I joined in, desperate to feel connected. Sometimes, when the night ended and everyone started to leave, I flirted with some of the guys to keep them around. It never went further than that, but I kept it from your father. Looking back, those moments planted the seeds of the mistakes that would later haunt me. After we graduated and moved back to Colorado, life felt stable again. Our wedding was a dream, and I was deeply in love. Your father got his dream job, and I worked in insurance. My job was simple and didn't require a degree, but I didn't care. We were happy, or so I thought. But the demons I had buried began to resurface, and within a few months, they broke free. As your father's work hours increased, the loneliness crept back in. I turned to my coworkers for company, spending evenings at bars to avoid being alone. One coworker, James, caught my attention. He reminded me of your father in some ways, but he also had traits that brought back memories of Uncle Jack, something I tried to ignore. One night, after too many drinks, I followed James to his house instead of going home. We ended up sleeping together on his couch. Overwhelmed with guilt, I left immediately, showered, and cried myself to sleep before your father came home. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, but James had other ideas. The next day, he cornered me at work, pulling me into a supply closet under the pretense of privacy. He dismissed my protests, asserting control in a way that mirrored Uncle Jack's actions years ago. I was paralyzed, transported back to the terrified 14-year-old girl who couldn't escape. James made it clear I belonged to him now, using my fear and shame to ensure my compliance. From that moment, my life spiraled further. The ghosts of my past and the choices I made in my desperation consumed me, creating the cracks that would eventually break apart everything we had built. When I got pregnant, I was overjoyed, believing it was your father's child. I hoped this would keep James away, and for a while, it worked. But shortly before your birth, he summoned me again, angry that I was carrying my husband's child. He demanded I name you James. Desperate, I agreed. I had no reason to suspect at first that James was your biological father. You looked so much like your dad, and we were overjoyed at your arrival. I stayed home to care for you, feeling fulfilled and no longer alone. But when I returned to work, James resumed his offense, sometimes bringing a friend, Caleb, to join him. This torment continued until I became pregnant again. Near the end of that pregnancy, James violated me in your father's bed, forcing me to name the baby Caleb. Again, I complied out of fear. After Caleb's birth, James was transferred to the East Coast, and I felt liberated, yet his actions left lasting scars. I realized I had lost respect for your father, who never suspected what I endured. Though my resentment grew, I focused on being the mother I wanted to be for you boys. Over time, I sank into depression and loneliness again. A coworker, Susan, encouraged me to go out and have fun. Her group of friends introduced me to a partying lifestyle, which soon led to meaningless flings. Months later, I discovered I was pregnant again. When Eric was born, I believed he was your father's child. as you all shared similar features. But I refused to name him after your father's dad, asserting my independence. After Eric's birth, I returned to partying with Susan. Another pregnancy followed, and when Daniel was born, I knew the truth. I could see he wasn't your father's son. I prayed no one would notice. Fearing discovery, I agreed with your father to have my tubes tied after Daniel's birth. I stayed home with you boys and tried to be the best mother I could, but I had lost all respect for your father. He never uncovered my betrayals, and to me, that meant he didn't care. Over time, I convinced myself he wasn't worthy of my love, or yours. I need to clarify something. I always understood his work. I went through his briefcase nightly, listened to his conversations, and retained everything he mentioned. Though he didn't realize it, I knew more than he gave me credit for, about secret airplane designs and other classified projects. He was contributing to our country's future while I felt trapped in envy and guilt over my own actions as an unfaithful wife. When you were about 5, I tried to distract myself by volunteering with local nonprofits. Meetings often involved cocktails, and before long they became an excuse to avoid being alone. My fears resurfaced, and I often imagined Uncle Jack lurking around every corner. One night, walking to my car after a meeting, someone approached me. I panicked and swung my purse, hitting a young woman who was simply heading to her car. I broke her jaw. That moment shocked me to my core, making me realize I needed help. A woman at the nonprofit referred me to Dr. Lauren Harper, a psychologist. Lauren quickly identified my struggles as rooted in trauma from Uncle Jack and my more recent experiences. We began unpacking the events that had shaped my behavior. Through therapy, I confronted my past, including the damage I had done to our family. Lauren helped me shift focus to your father and our sons. Over time, I realized the blame I had placed on your father was unfair. He had always been present for games, lessons, and milestones, even while working tirelessly. Lauren's guidance forced me to see that I had been trying to drive a wedge between him and his children out of misplaced guilt and resentment. Slowly, she helped me rediscover my love for him. Lauren became more than a therapist. She became a mentor and a friend. She even visited our home to observe family dynamics, offering insights and support. She was there when I admitted my fear that Daniel might not be your father's son. She urged me to share the truth, but I couldn't. Your father was a man of principle who believed in accountability. I knew he wouldn't accept any explanation that shifted blame to the past. Eventually, he must have discovered the truth. He left a note that simply read, "I know, James." Those days after he left were some of the hardest of my life. You were so strong, and I've never been prouder of you. On the 3rd day, I called Lauren, and she pulled me out of bed, reminding me that my sons needed me. Her support helped me rejoin the living. We began anew, a single mother raising 4 sons. Together, we weathered every challenge. While much of the credit belongs to you and your brothers, your father's influence was still present. His wisdom and guidance, passed down to you, shaped your decisions and character. I tried to find him. Friends, family, and coworkers had no answers. It was as if he had vanished. Months after he left, the FBI contacted me. They questioned me intensely, and I explained that he had left because he discovered my infidelity. I assured them your father was a trustworthy, honorable man. Later, I learned they had located him in Atlanta. They wouldn't share details. Over the years, I've asked about him a few times, but the FBI remains tight-lipped. After 2 years, I decided to hire a private investigator. Though we couldn't afford much, he conducted a thorough search but turned up nothing. Life carried on. You did everything you could to support us while your brother stayed in school. I know the sacrifices you made, giving up college and working to help the family. For that, I'll always be grateful. About a month after you left for your road trip to San Diego, I uncovered a new truth. I understood why you needed that trip. Vanessa Brown wasn't the right person for you. I could see through her and hoped you wouldn't be too heartbroken when you realized it too. When you returned, you were a different person, more confident and aware, and even more helpful to your brothers and me. Before you left, I had been feeling unwell. Food lost its taste, I had persistent cramping, and my weight dropped. While you were gone, I finally went to see a doctor. After some tests, I was diagnosed with cancer. It had started in my ovaries and had already spread by the time we caught it. The outlook was grim. Though treatment could delay the inevitable, it wouldn't stop it. That's when I made another discovery. While searching your father's desk for insurance documents, I came across DNA test results. Like your father, I came face to face with the extent of my betrayal. The weight of it was unbearable. Suddenly, I understood why he had never come back. If the roles were reversed, I would have done the same. This revelation sealed my fate. I contemplated ending things early, but Lauren convinced me I needed to make plans for the future. I focused on ensuring you and your brothers would be stable after I was gone. I encouraged Eric and Caleb to attend San Diego State, then pushed Daniel to join them when he had his relapse, knowing you would end up there to support him. James, I did this for a reason. I didn't want you to witness my decline or for my death to become another dark chapter. I also didn't want to be remembered as a hero. I wanted you all to move on and live the lives your father had always hoped for you. When Eric and Caleb were accepted, I was thrilled. Daniel's challenges gave me the chance to send him to his brothers, knowing you'd step in to help him. I hated using you in that way, but I believed it was for the best. Now, as I lay here on my deathbed, I reflect on the good that came from my life. You, Caleb, Eric, and Daniel are my greatest blessings. Protect each other. Daniel still struggles, but maybe the truth will set him free. The end is near, and I have one last thing to tell you. A friend mentioned last year that she thought she saw your father in San Diego. James, you need to find him. The idea of you boys reconnecting with your father gives me peace. I know my time is short, but knowing he might be there to guide you after I'm gone makes it easier to let go. Please share my story with him. I know he may never forgive me, but he must forgive himself. He is Daniel's father in every way that matters, regardless of biology. He will care for Daniel, as he always has. If you need help, contact the FBI agent who once questioned me. He may have answers. As my pain grows and my days shorten, I know this is my burden to bear. I loved your father, but I destroyed him. Our family was built on lies, and when those lies came to light, it all crumbled. Only your father's strength and the love he gave you boys kept us afloat. Your father is not to blame for any of this. He is your father in every way that matters. Seek him out. He'll take responsibility, as he always has. Accept him for who he is and rebuild your family. James, the cancer is taking over. I've refused the morphine because I need to face this. I know you want to come home, but I can't allow it. This is how it must be. You must remain with your family. As I fade, I imagine you all with your father, and it gives me hope. If you find him, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him. All my love, Mom. P.S. There's a second letter for your father. If you ever find him, please give it to him. James folded the tear-soaked letter and returned it to the envelope, holding the second letter meant for his father. Overwhelmed by grief and the weight of what he'd learned, he cried himself to sleep. The next morning, James shared both letters with his brothers and their father. James called Lauren, who came over quickly. She shared her memories of working with their troubled mother and her journey toward healing. Then she turned her attention to the family, helping them begin a new chapter. She saw their love and resilience and knew they'd thrive together. With Eric and Caleb enrolled at San Diego State, Daniel living with them, and their father supporting them, the family made arrangements to sell their mother's house. After a week in Colorado, the father and 3 sons returned to San Diego by company jet, while James stayed behind to finalize the sale. He donated most of the furniture and shipped their personal belongings west. Before leaving, James took one last look at the home where they'd grown up, cherishing the good memories. Locking the door for the final time, he started the drive to rejoin his family in California. 5 years later, the family had flourished. Eric and Caleb graduated and found successful careers. James returned to school, working toward a master's degree. Under his father's guidance, Daniel overcame his struggles, excelled academically, and attended UC San Diego. His passion for music also grew, and his band performed regularly in San Diego's Gaslamp district. Their father began therapy with Lauren's recommendation, working through the past with someone named Vivian. There was hope for all of them.